Hello, Mr. Abraham. Can you see me?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, wonderful. So I think we are online now, Doctor.
Yes.
And I can see people signing in at a rapid pace on the top.
Good, good.
So, good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Abraham. I am president of the Hinduja Foundation and a co-collaborator with Dr. Mohan. Of course, I am just a layman. Dr. Mohan is the expert, and we are looking to have a free-flowing conversation. Tomorrow is World Diabetes Day, and I think nobody better than Dr. Mohan to walk us through some of the issues, some of the perspectives, some of the aspects with diabetes as a condition that afflicts a lot of people in the country and in the world. Diabetes, of course, has a history of its own, which is, you know, the people fighting the battle for many, many, many years. In fact, the original discovery of insulin is attributed to the year 1921. So, as all of us, add up, there is more than 100 years of fight with diabetes that's going on, and there's been much progress. And I think we'll hear more from Dr. Mohan on that. To introduce Dr. Mohan to the audiences, I'm sure most of the people know about him. Dr. Mohan is probably one of the foremost, diabetologists, if I may call it that, in not only India but in the world. Has a long history, in fact, a lifetime, and a history of dealing with, being at the forefront of the whole treatment, fight, and support of diabetes through his own expertise and through the institutional infrastructure that he has set up in Chennai, the Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, amongst others. And we are, looking forward to, an exciting 45 minutes or so of walking the, diabetes journey along with Dr. Mohan. So welcome, Dr. Mohan.
Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Paul Abraham. First of all, thank you for that very kind introduction. It's a great honor for me to be part of this program for two or three reasons. The first is that we work very closely with the Hinduja Foundation, and you have been very kind. The foundation is very kind to support many of our people who need free treatment, and that's been a great change the lives of a lot of people. Secondly, because you are personally conducting this, a person of your profile, to be the moderator and to ask me the questions and to chair this, I'm very honored. And thirdly, because it's World Diabetes Day, which is tomorrow, and therefore it gives us an opportunity to reach out. And I'm already seeing many of the names whom I know. My good friend and favorite student, Dr. Lakshmi Ayappa, I saw there, and many others who have joined. So good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure. We'll try to make this, of course, Mr. Paul Abraham has a number of questions which will be of use to you, I'm sure. But then if you have other questions, I'm sure we will pick it up at the end as well. So we are ready to start.
Wonderful. So, Doctor, I think I'll start with what would be typically the very first question. A lot of people obviously signed on know exactly what diabetes is, but I'm sure there are others who may want to, who've heard this term being bandied about, but really don't know what it is. So, in layman's term, what is diabetes?
So we have, there is a fuel that we need to work, to have energy, in fact, to sustain life. And that fuel is glucose. So glucose is the fundamental unit. If there's no glucose in the body, we'll all die. It just needs a few minutes of having zero sugar and you'll be dead. The brain is gone, everything is gone. So it's like fuel in a car, which you definitely need glucose. But nature is so wonderful that it moderates this level of glucose so narrowly that it doesn't go beyond a particular point high or low. For example, we know Mahatma Gandhi fasted for 20 days, 21 days. He didn't get low sugar at all. The body makes up for it by bringing in some other hormones which will increase the sugar. Similarly, unless you have diabetes, if your sugar starts going high, let's say we took a gulab jamun and the sugar starts rising. For a person without diabetes, they're blessed with so much of insulin in the body that automatically there's an outpouring of that insulin. And before the glucose even reaches, say, 130, 140, the body has already sensed it, brought it down, and kept it within normal limits. So it's almost impossible to raise the blood glucose level of somebody who does not have diabetes. Of course, there are exceptions. You give steroid to somebody or an IV glucose drip, there may be a transient increase, but it will automatically come down. So nature is wonderful in that it's able to maintain it within that narrow limit of neither going too high or too low. So the normal value of fasting is below 100 milligrams. Now from 100 to 101 to 125, we call it as pre-diabetes. And if it crosses 126, we call it as diabetes. You may wonder why this 126 and not 125. In the West, especially in Europe and in UK, they follow the SI system. And so the SI units. So it comes in millimoles, and 1 millimole is 18 milligrams. So 7 millimoles and above is 126 milligrams is the diagnostic cut point for diabetes. After an oral glucose load, if you do a GTT, above 200 is diabetes, below 140 is normal, and 141 to 199 is again pre-diabetes. There's a third test called HbA1c, 3 months control test. Below 5.6 is normal, 5.7 to 6.4 is pre-diabetes, and 6.5 and above is diabetes. Any one of these tests is enough to diagnose diabetes. So in short, the level of glucose should be at a certain level. And if it's above that continuously, not just once for one erratic reading, but continuously high, you have diabetes.
All right. And of course, we've heard of term, especially since the Hinduja Foundation works with you in the specific condition of type 1 diabetes. So there are obviously variants to the condition.
Types.
So what are some of the broad ones so that our audience is made aware?
Yeah. So the commonest form of diabetes, and we shouldn't make this mistake of generalizing that everybody has type 2 diabetes, which is a common form. Because it forms 90% of all the diabetic patients in the world and in India, whenever we say diabetes, we assume it's type 2 diabetes. Need not be at all. For example, if a child, say below the age of 10 years, gets diabetes, most likely it is type 1 diabetes. And type 1 diabetes is a type where you have to take lifelong insulin injections. And as you rightly said, 1921, when Banting and Best discovered insulin, was a turning point, because until then it was a death sentence. If a child was developed type 1 diabetes, the maximum lifespan was about, say, 3 months, 6 months. 1 year was unusual. Beyond 1 year is a miracle, and nobody beyond 2 years was actually documented to have type 1 diabetes. So that was a situation until Banting and Best discovered this. And the main player in that, of course, was Banting, Frederick Banting. And that is why November 14th is celebrated as World Diabetes Day, because it's his birthday. And that is the greatest discovery. Yesterday I was talking in another meeting and saying, talking about insulin. And people are saying, well, discoveries like insulin comes only once in a century. Non-diabetic people are also saying, we have only marginal advances in medicine, little bit. Insulin is like such a big discovery that the Nobel Prize for the first time in Nobel history was awarded within 1 year. But they realized dying children getting up. It's like, child about to die, and then you just inject this and child is getting up. It was as dramatic as that. So the Nobel Committee had no hesitation. They said we shouldn't even delay this. Within a year, they gave the Nobel Prize. So that is type 1 diabetes, where you have to necessarily inject insulin. But there are other, in type 2, there is enough insulin that insulin doesn't work. So you give tablets or diet, exercise, something, reduce stress, make the sugar under control. There are other forms. Gestational diabetes, due to pregnancy, you get diabetes, which goes away after the pregnancy usually, may come back. There are others where due to stones in the pancreas, you can get, very common in Kerala, Tamil Nadu. We call it as fibrocalcific pancreatic diabetes. In the pancreas, you get stones. So that knocks off all the insulin. Then you get diabetes, which again requires insulin. There are genetic forms of diabetes. For example, all children need not have type 1 diabetes. There are a few who either have a family history or some other genetic mutation, which actually responds better to tablets. So And there are about 20 different types of that. So all in all, there are about 40, 50 different types of diabetes. And that is why a person like me can spend my entire life, last 50 years on diabetes. I'm still learning because
Yeah.
there's so much in that field. People think it's only type 2 diabetes, only type 1 diabetes. It's not so. But coming back to your question of type 1 diabetes, that is the most difficult type of diabetes because it requires insulin 4 times a day. So every time you eat, every time you're injecting insulin, you have to be careful that you don't get low sugar. It's like walking on a tightrope. But having said that, once you master that and once you get it under control, people can live their full span of life. I've seen patients living for 60, 70 years or more with type 1 diabetes, taking insulin all the time. So all is not lost even if you have type 1 diabetes. Just means you have to pay a little more attention. And today we've got technology and we can talk about that. So much of technology has come. It's not like Banting's days where a crude extract, because the breakthrough we got but that was not the one which was used ultimately for treatment. That had to be purified. So many people had to come in to purify it. The chemist had to come, so many people, and that controversy, who really should have got the Nobel Prize, still continues. But having said that, that was a milestone.
In fact, I would, recommend the audience to read this book, which I have myself read. And I must say that, with all of these situations, I think we often forget there's a long trail of a backstory. It's not something that happened overnight. And there were many, many people working away. In fact, I would, like you to give us a little bit, because it's almost like a thriller.
It is a thriller.
The story of Banting. Actually, there was McLeod, there was Banting, there was Best, and there was Collip. And
Collip.
Yeah. So there were these 4 people who initially were seen as the group that made it happen. Of course, there were a bunch of pharma companies thereafter, and there was a bunch of people before. So, was Banting even a doctor?
He was a doctor. So let me tell you the story.
Yeah.
So Banting was, he was a student, he was a medical student, he was a doctor, but he was a very kind of average doctor. He was not one of those brilliant, IQ, high IQ. He actually almost failed in his exam and he had to be pushed up because they wanted doctors for the World War. World War I was going on, 1918. Yeah. So they said, pass everyone, then like COVID, people are saying, don't even conduct the final exam, just pass everybody. We need more doctors to treat. Even Dr. Devi Shetty had said, somehow this batch has to just come out because we need doctors, hands. So it was that kind of a situation. He was a very average guy and also eccentric, totally eccentric he was.
Yeah.
But he was born for this. Certain people are born in the world for this. He was a surgeon and even during the army, during the war, he was shot. The Germans had shot him. And with the bleeding wound, he went on dressing, other people until a senior came and said, get out and, you are going to die. And for that, he got a medal, a war medal as a hero. So he had that stubbornness in him, but he didn't know much. And then he was one day reading something about pancreas to take a class because he didn't have enough to eat. So he was taking some physiology classes, pharmacology classes, which he hated. And just to make some money. When he was reading that, he got bored and he went to sleep. See, this is divine intervention. Yeah. Suddenly at 2 a.m., some dream he gets saying pancreas, ligate it, tie it, cut it, dog, something else. So he scribbles a few lines and it's very funny because he didn't know how to spell diabetes. So he wrote diabetus, D-I-A-B-T-U-S. That's a guy who, I often tell my people, we all study physiology, we do this, we do research for 50 years and we don't make any discovery. And here is a guy, an average doctor who didn't even know how to spell diabetes, finding the cure for diabetes. So that's divine intervention. So anyway, next day he takes this and he says, why did I write this? And then he becomes mad. He becomes this obsession with him. I must somehow do this. And there were no facilities in Western Ontario where he was working. So his boss, one of the people who knew him, says, you go and meet one McLeod. He's very good. Now, McLeod was a big professor. He was already the president of the American Physiology Society. He's written books. He's a very famous guy. So he just walks into McLeod's room and he says, I know the cure for diabetes and I'm going to cure it. And McLeod says, who are you first? And what are you? I mean, what are you talking? And then McLeod asks him a few questions. This guy's not even read up the literature. And MacLeod says, there are 50 people like you who already tried this pancreas story and all that. In fact, there's a Romanian Polesco who had actually discovered insulin, injected it. Unfortunately, he went and published it in a Romanian journal, which nobody knew. And there's a lot of controversy that he should have got the Nobel Prize, not Banting. Others had discovered the Nobel Prize, but then because of the war, their lab was shut down. In another case, one guy has discovered, but his boss didn't believe him, So there are a lot of people before Banting, but ultimately it was destined for Banting. So then Banting, big fight with MacLeod on that first day itself. Then finally, MacLeod says, okay, if you want to come and work here, I'll give you my lab. 2 months I'm going off to Scotland. So that time you come. And but don't break anything, don't steal anything, but I'll give you the lab. But after 2 months when I come back, you get out. Because I'm sure you won't do anything with this. So he says, no, I'll come. And he says, during that time, no practice, nothing. I won't give you any money. I'll just give you 8 dogs. That's it. Then he goes there. And then MacLeod asks him, do you know how to operate these dogs? He didn't even know that. Then MacLeod shows him, this is how you open the dog, this is what you do. Then he also gives him a medical student called Best and says, you need somebody to help you. So he gets Best. That's another story because Best and another guy, they toss a coin and this guy wins. Best wins. And the other guy is supposed to join after a few months, but he never works. So finally, Best comes to help him. Yeah. So they start off. And then they've got 8 weeks. And during 8 weeks, their first 4 weeks went nothing. Dogs were dying. In fact, he used to go and stealthily buy dogs from the road. With only 8 dogs is given. And he was called a dog stealer and all that, in the Toronto paper headlines and all that. So to cut a long story short, somewhere by the 6th week of the allotted time, suddenly they made this discovery where they took out the pancreas from a dog, crushed it, made it into some kind of a crude extract, injected it into another diabetic dog, and the blood sugar dropped. So they said, is this fluke? Then they repeated it, again it happened. Then they shot off a telegram to MacLeod, who was in Scotland, and said, come, and we have found something. So that guy hurries back because he knows there's something there. First thing he says is, I don't believe you. So you have to repeat all the experiment. This guy shouts at him. He says, what the hell you give me? You don't even believe me. He says, no, you have to do everything in my presence now. He's another tough Scottish guy, So finally he repeats it now and he gets the thing. And the name insulin is actually given by MacLeod. Okay. Yeah. He wanted to call it Iletin or something. And then the crude extract that they had, and Banting didn't have the license to practice there. So he could not he wanted to inject it into the first human after the dog experiment. He didn't have the license. So he has to wait outside while some junior doctor injected. All this infuriated him. And, finally, it was shown that in the first, patient, Leonard Thompson, the sugar dropped and the rest is history. Yeah. But then comes this extract which Best had prepared. This man takes it out, does a surgery, he's a surgeon. Best is a medical student. He was kind of trying to purify it and all that. He didn't do a good job of it. So they had to bring in Collip, who was a chemist, top-class chemist. And it's Collip's preparation which actually resulted in that. So finally, what happened was the Nobel Committee had come to hear about this. When they came on a visit, they heard some discovery, something. And they heard the story from MacLeod. And MacLeod said, in my lab, this guy did this, did that, and all that. And so Best's name wasn't even nominated for the Nobel Prize. And MacLeod and Banting were nominated, and they got the Nobel Prize. Banting was so furious. He said, I won't come to the Nobel Prize committee. I don't want the Nobel Prize, And that was Canada's first Nobel Prize. So all the Canadian professors, heads of science, all when they begged him, please accept. Otherwise, the only Nobel Prize you got in Canada will go away. Please accept. So he accepts, but he doesn't go for the function. He said, I can't stand with that fellow, and get a photograph with him. So then they went on separate days and they never stood together. There's not a single photograph of Banting and MacLeod together. And then Best felt very upset because you did all the experiments. His name was not even proposed. And without proposing, you cannot get. And Collip, and finally when Banting got it, he said, MacLeod doesn't deserve it. So I'm going to share my prize money with Best. Then MacLeod, not to be outdone, he said, only Collip purified it. So I'm going to share it with Collip. So finally, all the 4 got the money part, although in the name only 2 were there. And they never spoke to each other after that. And Banting, after that, he became a recluse. He became an alcoholic. He took to painting, and there's some fantastic paintings of Banting. He became among the top painters in Canada. But his medical career was kind of finished. He thought, after discovering insulin, he'll discover everything else. And he tried his luck in cancer, tried this, failed in everything, and
Yes.
finally died in an air crash, which he was stealthily trying to leave the country in a plane, and the plane crashed and he died. And the only thing he said was that, I don't mind dying. But by the time he had fought with Banting also. And he said, that fellow should never be made the professor. If he does, I'll turn in my grave and all, he said. Promptly, Banting best was made the professor after he died, after MacLeod left. Because MacLeod couldn't take the shame of this fellow insulting him all the time, in the press. This fellow did nothing. This fellow did nothing. This fellow did. So he couldn't stay in Canada. So he left. He went back to Scotland. He never did diabetes research again, MacLeod. Banting, of course, made a total fool of himself after that, except as a painter. Best became a well-known professor. He wrote the Best and Taylor textbook. He lived up to 90 years of age and didn't get the Nobel Prize, although he was nominated later on for many other discoveries. He didn't get but he was one of the best physiologists in the world. And Collip also was a great chemist. He also discovered a lot of things. So that's a story.
Yeah, it's an amazing
so much
story.
of drama. It's a drama behind the whole thing. And movies have been made about that.
Yeah, that entire phase which you so vividly write about in your book, I was quite fascinated because you also talk about, going to, the actual, of course, the original building has been demolished.
That is what inspired me to write.
Yeah.
They've kept out a museum of his glasses, the colorimeter which Best used, the pestle and mortar which they used to mix it, Collip's thing, what they did. Everything is kept there. The only thing missing is there's no photograph of Banting and Best together. There are pictures with the dog and all that. But MacLeod and Banting, the guys who got the Nobel Prize, there's no picture of them together at all.
What an amazing story. What an amazing story. And of course, there were a couple of the corporates who also kind of weighed in a little bit.
So Lilly, because they knew that these guys can't ramp it up. And Lilly was, following these people. And they came and said, we are happy to come because scientists cannot take it to market. They cannot commercialize it. And Lilly was into enzymes and all that. So they felt it was a good thing for them. Of course, then Banting again demanded, I need all the insulin to treat my patient. They said, okay, we'll give you all the batches first. We'll give you. And he actually did treat a lot of children and save them, including Elizabeth Hughes, who was one of the first girls to take this. And her father, stood for American presidentship, and he lost to Woodrow Wilson. But then he later became the Secretary of State. And that girl who got the shots of insulin from Banting, she never revealed that she had diabetes. She went to another city, changed her name, because her father had used influence for Banting to beat the tube.
Okay.
And because of that shame, she didn't want her father's name to get. It's only her grandson who later discovered that all this had been done. But Banting had saved her. And Lilly did that. Very quickly, Novo Nordisk got in almost the same year. Nobel Prize also came in 1923. The insulin discovery also came. But what is interesting to us in that book is that my question was, when did insulin come to India? And nobody knew. My father had not told me. Nobody had told me. So after all the research I did, I found out that in India also it had come in 1923, which is very, very happy thing to hear. Very early. And then I found out who was the first person who received the insulin. And I have a picture of her in that book, Kumudini. Was a 12-year-old girl who took insulin, who got insulin. Leonard Thompson is very well known. Now Kumudini has become famous because of this discovery. It had all been published, but all the literature, all the journals and all had gone away after independence. So then I had to rediscover all that. And it's a fascinating story.
Absolutely fascinating story, And so that brings me to the next logical thing, What is India's challenge with diabetes today, as you see?
The first challenge is the sheer number of people with diabetes. See, if you take today, officially, we have 74 million people with diabetes. Now, those who can afford, those who can look after themselves, that's fine. But what about those who cannot afford? You need to check your sugars, you have to take tablets, you might have to have some special dietary things, you need space to exercise. And for people with type 1 diabetes, insulin and all its glucometer, the strips, everything which goes along, paraphernalia along with that. So when you're trying to give this to everyone, all the 74 million people, you will find that many are not able to. And I have known children focusing on type 1. I have known children with type 1 diabetes who have died because of lack of insulin. In Africa and all, it's still happening. In India, because the government is giving free insulin, to a large extent, we can say if they find the right place, they can still survive. I think it would be unfair to say that in India, many people are dying because of lack of insulin. But what happens is, because of lack of education and lack of awareness, they may not take the required amount. If they are asked to take 4 times a day, they'll take twice a day. What will happen is, they'll remain alive. They won't die. But 15 years later, the kidney will go, eye will go, blindness, amputation, heart attacks, all these things come. So their lifespan is shortened.
Yeah.
So what happens is, type 1 diabetes, if not properly treated, 15 to 20 years of their life will get shortened. Okay. So whereas if you control your diabetes well, people are now living up to 80 and 90 years of age or even beyond. So that is the first thing. The sheer numbers, the lack of affordability, lack of awareness, illiteracy, and sometimes just lack of motivation. Because see, if a girl child, for example, gets diabetes, that the stigma and that discrimination is still there. The parents will say, they already have a son. This guy, is okay. This girl, we are going to give her insulin, we're going to give her this, nobody will marry her. All these, although that's not true. There are a lot of type 1s who have got married happily, they've got children, they've got everything. But the stigma associated with this and the fear. So all these things, there's a lot of work to do on the, not only on the medical side, trying to find something better if it's possible, but also on the psychosocial side, on the socio-economic side. There are so many angles to diabetes. It's not just science and giving insulin or measuring blood sugar. There's much more than that.
Yeah. So there's the human side of it. And from what you say, a good quality treatment can make the difference of as much as maybe 15, 20 years in a person's lifetime. So what
apart from quality of life, quality of life.
Yes. So in terms of today's state of the art, in terms of what is available in the fight against, diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, would you give us a sense of the landscape? Apart from, say, insulin availability, there are many other aspects to this in terms of, keeping them alive, active, keeping them informed, even using technology to make the treatment itself very specific. So what does that landscape look like?
So first, let's talk about insulin. So in insulin itself, there are different types. There is human insulin, there's analog insulin, long-acting insulin, Some of those don't produce hypoglycemia. Whereas some of the older ones, you'll get repeated hypoglycemia. So if you give people a better quality insulin, better long-acting insulin, doesn't produce hypoglycemia, their quality of life will be very good. But all the time they're scared. Will I get low sugar? Will I get low sugar? That's the first part. Second part relates to the delivery of the insulin. How are you going to give it? Earlier, they had these long syringes in Banting's time and all. The syringe would have been like this, big one, the big needle, that size. That's how they used to crude, like giving animals insulin or something. That is how they used to give. Then came smaller, finer needles. Then came the insulin pens, where the needle is so small and you can carry it with you. There's no stigma. It doesn't need air conditioning. So that came. Then came the pumps. So where you can deliver the insulin using a pump. Okay, the pump is like a small pager shaped thing. It'll be smaller than this. And then you just wear it on your, belt or something. And then the small, tubing, which you put it under your skin and put a plaster on it. And that's it. And then you can program it. Say, morning I want so much, afternoon I want so much, night I want so much. This is the delivery rate. Once you do that, they continuously get the insulin. So that is something which has revolutionized. Now that has gone to the next stage where an artificial pancreas has come. So what happens is that this machine talks to a sensor, and the sensor tells the pump what is the glucose level and whether it's rising or falling. Using that loop system, the pump then can decide using artificial intelligence, saying, okay, blood sugar is rising, I have to increase the rate of flow. Blood sugar is dropping, I have to reduce the rate of flow. Blood sugar has dropped too much, I stop the insulin now. Everything takes place like a conversation between the sensor and the pump. Everything is done automatically. It's almost like autopilot. To give you a rough example, driverless car or pilotless plane, it's not an impossibility. If you don't need actually a pilot to move all that. Sitting from here using a remote control, you can let a plane take off, you can let a plane come down. Because everything is artificial intelligence controlled. So similarly, studying your blood sugar pattern, and if you just tell it what you ate in terms of carbohydrate, the machine is able to do that. Now, the problem is that that machine costs about 6 lakhs or so. How many people in India can, and there is a running cost of about 10-20,000 rupees a month. So how many people can afford that 6 lakhs, and how many people can afford the 20,000 running cost, which is more than 2 lakhs a year? So that becomes a problem. Those who can afford can do that. Now, even if it's a charity, even our own type 1 patients, now, if I had 10 lakhs, I can give one patient insulin. Okay. If I had 10 lakhs to give us insulin injection with a pen, I can give it to 100 people.
Yeah.
So naturally, I would prefer that, keep them alive, rather than put them onto high technology, which is thing. It's sad to say that, because this is total lack of equity, in the distribution. But that's what it is. Life is like that. Everything is not thing. So the good news is that technology is coming better and better and better. The bad news is that when technology comes, it comes at a cost, which means that for some time, affordability will be. That is where, again, hats off to Banting. Banting could have become a very rich man after he discovered insulin. But he wrote off the patent and said, for $1 I'm giving away, because insulin belongs to the world. That is his famous quote. And $1. And he used to joke that even that $1
$1 he didn't get.
He didn't get. It's a fact.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there were great people. I mean, imagine a guy who discovers all this, spends his whole life, makes a discovery, gets a Nobel Prize for it, and says, now you take it, the whole world. So that sense, he was a great man, no doubt. So I think there are a lot of, but there are, to be honest, for example, in India, Dr. Kiran Majumdar is working very hard to make insulin affordable. So she says 10 cents a day will all be the cost of insulin treatment for somebody. And whole world, she's telling, I'll supply my insulin, which is a generic. It'll cost only 10 cents a day. Whether literally it'll be 10 cents a day or not, I don't know. It's like the 1 lakh car of Tata. It may not have come at 1 lakh, but it's a concept saying that you can make it available. Today, insulin is not unaffordable only in India. In the US, it is unaffordable. The same insulin we have here, the same brand, same company, can cost 20 times more, or even 50 times more. So much so that I've heard that even in the US, one of the most developed countries, they are rationing their insulin because they can't afford. Or they're trying to illegally get it from Canada or Mexico, where it is much cheaper. Okay. So there are a lot of market forces also driving this. I'm sure the companies won't like it when you say this. They'll say, we are here to make money. But then the common man really suffers. And so I think there's a lot to diabetes treatment rather than just insulin and making it. And then the other thing you mentioned, technology. There are small, devices like a small coin, which you can just put on your arm.
Yes.
And that's not very expensive either. It's like a carom board coin. Just stick it on your arm. And then it continuously reads the blood glucose for 14 days. 100 blood sugars a day come out. When I worked in Germany as an Alexander von Humboldt Fellow in 1985-86, my Professor Pfeiffer's dream was to get a continuous glucose monitoring. One whole year I worked, flopped miserably. Nothing happened. The machine was as big as a washing machine or something. And you have to cart that around. And it was giving all erratic results. So we gave up. At the end of a year, we said, no, we can't produce it. It took another 10, 12 years for them to miniaturize it and then bring it in. Another 10 to 20 years for it to become freely available for the market. So 20, 30 years after I worked, today it's become a thing. And Professor Pfeiffer would have been very happy if we had known this. But today, we almost take it for granted, especially if it's type 1 diabetes abroad. Nobody treats without continuous glucose monitoring. Because anytime you have a small reader like that, you can just show it there and you can check what your sugar is that minute.
Yes.
You're feeling giddy. Is it low or high? Just see like that. In 1 second, you'll know the reading. Okay. You don't need even a glucose meter to check. You don't need to poke. No blood. So life is getting better and better. Of course, this is not that expensive like a pump, so people can afford it. But even then, when talking about numbers, you want to give this to 2 lakh people, then the cost adds up. You add 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 into so many lakhs, it becomes very, very expensive. So,
but I think, doctor, framing this as an issue in itself is a good starting point to try and address it. because
Yeah.
I feel that, once you have a next level of treatment,
Yeah.
then the immediate social, moral challenges to
To make it
give
available.
everyone an equal
Everyone.
opportunity to have that access. So I
I'm
think,
glad you
yes,
mentioned that, because I did a rough back of the envelope. I'm not an economist, but I did a back of the envelope calculation. And I said, what does it take to give every child with type 1 diabetes insulin so that nobody in India will die due to lack of insulin? Believe it or not, it's only about 300, 400 crores per year. I mean, in a country like India, I think 300, 400 crores is such a big amount. Every company makes, tons of that in one quarter as profit.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I was just thinking, even if 10, 20 industrialists came together and said, I will take 10,000 children, I'll take 20,000 children. If they just divide it among themselves and support, the problem is over. Nobody in India will die due to lack of insulin. It's as simple as that.
yeah,
So as you said, once you define the problem and once you make a case for it and say, this is what we need, I'm sure a lot of philanthropic minded people are there and they'll come forward. And the government also is doing a lot. Not to say the
yeah,
government is not doing. In Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and many other states, I'm sure. I think anybody can walk into any government, even to a primary healthcare or secondary healthcare level. Insulin is available. All types of treatments are available. Glucose meters are available. Strips are available. Tablets are available. Everything is available. The knowledge about that, awareness of that, and if you tell these governments that we need it, they will do it. They will do it. For example, you divide that same 400 crores, which I said, by 30 states in India. What is it, 10, 20 crores for a
yeah,
government to give? It's
yeah,
nothing per year. They can easily give it.
yeah. So I think it's also, I think, like you said, the key is also advocacy at the right place with the right framing of the issue at hand. And
Correct.
this is not something that is so we made a little start with your organization, Dr. Yajnik in Pune, Hinduja Hospital, and I think one of our endeavors is also to rope in the corporates. So we
Correct.
do. In fact, you earlier did mention Novo Nordisk as an early
Novo has joined us.
role.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Correct.
Novo Nordisk is one of our partners too in this journey.
Yeah.
Uh, so I guess it's something that we really need to work on. There is, like we talked about the backstories in the
Yeah.
1920s. Today's backstory, I think, is how we'll bring all the communities together to
Yes.
face up to this not such a huge challenge technically,
Yes.
but
Yes.
just a question of getting everyone together.
If I can just jump in here, I think Mr. Paul Abraham being very modest when he said we made a small start and all that. Actually, they are supporting quite a large number of children with type 1 diabetes, several hundred, in fact, at each of these three centers, at our Madras Diabetes Research Foundation in Chennai, the KEM Hospital, Dr. Yajnik in Pune, and the Hinduja Hospital, Dr. Felrona Chauhan and Manoj Chada and others, their own hospital in Mumbai. And this is just a start. And one of the things I think, Paul Abraham, which we should do is to make an economic impact of this. And, okay, people did not afford insulin before we gave these children. What happened to them? How much impact did we make? How much of, okay, we spend a certain amount of money, but in terms of quality of life, in terms of preventing complications, and in terms of preventing the cost of those complications. For example, you develop kidney disease, you have to do lifelong dialysis or transplantation, which all goes to lakhs and lakhs of rupees. So
Yeah.
while the child might have been given only a few thousand rupees worth of insulin or supplies, you are actually prevented lakhs worth of treatment later. So I think that that is something which we should do, and to show the world. If we make a nice case of that, I'm sure other corporates will also join. Oh, that's all it costs. This is the thing. Everywhere, by showing by example that it's possible, more people will get inspired.
So, Doctor, now I want to come to, a few of the beautiful stories that you put in your book, because at the end of the day, you mentioned that once you get access, you literally are transformed with a basic discipline, of course, into a near normal, life. And, in your book, there were 2, 3 particularly inspiring stories. There was one about Lakshmi Narayana, there was one about Sridhar Rajmohan, there was one about Jazz Sethi. So would you just elaborate on these stories?
I can definitely do that. Let's take Lakshmi Narayana first. Lakshmi Narayana is a young man from Andhra. Unfortunately, due to some genetic thing, he was born with no vision. In both his eyes, zero vision. And then with that, he managed to continue his studies and to go to school and everything. And was that itself is enough. You can imagine how difficult it would be if he didn't have vision from birth. He's never seen, And then at the age of 15, 16, as an adolescent, he develops type 1 diabetes, a second blow to him. Now, for a person with vision itself, it's not easy to manage type 1 diabetes. You have to see the sugars, you have to adjust the doses, you have to, see how much insulin you're injecting, you have to measure what you're eating, you have to match all these things. It's like a, very complex, jigsaw puzzle which you're trying to think. Imagine doing all this, you have no vision, how it's going to be. How do you know how much insulin you've taken? How do you know what your sugar is now? You poke yourself, put it into the thing. What reading did you get? He found solutions for all of these. He got, glucose meters to have an audio. So if it comes to this, it tells him the reading, 235. Okay, he does that. What is amazing about him is that I've met him several times. He actually goes and motivates children with type 1 diabetes, with showing them that despite not having vision and having type 1 diabetes, I've done this. And he keeps the sugars under absolute control. Very few hypoglycemia, low sugar, high sugar, and all that. Tremendous, he's a hero. So last year we gave him the type 1 diabetes hero award. But apart from that, he has never, given up on himself. He's only had positive things to pass on to people. And if I send him a WhatsApp message, if I just send him a WhatsApp message now, in a minute he replies back. Now, how he reads a WhatsApp, how he replies, how he types back, having no vision and all that, he's so prompt. It's not that after one day he replies. Within a minute you'll get your reply from him, the answer to whatever you wanted. He has adapted various technologies which help the visually impaired and made use of all of them and made his life a success story. So he didn't allow type 1 diabetes or his vision problem to affect him. So he can be a true role model for many people. You talked about Jazz Sethi. Jazz Sethi is the daughter of the famous Geet Sethi, India's snooker and billiards champion. And you can see, what an accomplished young lady she is. Now, she developed her own insulin pump, DIY. So she bought various components of the pump. She did it herself. She got the loop system to connect her glucose sensor to her pump. To an extent, I feel jealous when I see Jazz. You look at her blood sugar, it'll be a straight line. Okay. No, it doesn't go up at all. For a type 1 person, you'll think they cooked it up. You cannot even expect, even in a type 2, a normal person also you cannot expect. There'll be ups and downs. And she manages so beautifully that her sugar doesn't go up at all. It's like, is it Jazz? Is this yours? I can't even believe that you're doing this. Yeah, I did it. I just had to learn a few things and tricks and then do that. Not only that, she's a very accomplished dancer, choreographer. She has started her own, society called Diabesties, where she calls children with type 1 diabetes, motivates them, and does all kinds of things like that. Nupur Lalwani is another very good example, another similar story where she has her own foundation called as the Blue Foundation, very large network. She even tries to get discounts on insulin supplies and help people. Some of these places where these type 1s meet is also matchmaking sessions. So, a boy and a girl can meet with type 1 diabetes and decide to get married. There's so much of social support and they all share their stories. And Nupur also keeps the sugars under good control. Harsh Kohli, another very, very young, good young man who got type 1 diabetes himself. And then he was not that careful until his son Arush developed type 1 diabetes. Then he said, I cannot be like this. Now with my child having type 1 diabetes, I have to look after. So not only looked after himself, looked after, improved his own control, his son's control. He is like a motivator. If I have a difficult patient at my center, he's in Delhi. If I have a difficult patient, I'll tell my team, Harsh, just talk to these people. No, this child is not accepting insulin. He'll spend an hour on Zoom with them, talking to them. And they all, after that thing, they're all smiling and, they accept the thing. So these are all people who have not only conquered their own life, but they've gone beyond. Sridhar Rajmohan was one of my patients. He started running marathon, and how he ran the marathon, initially used to get low sugars when running. Then he learned how to do that. And now he is regularly running marathons and all that. And Noopur also runs. And so these are all fantastic stories. Meena Fernandez from Bombay. She got diabetes when she was a teenager. Today she's 70 plus. She's a grandmother, and she's managed all her life without any complications. And there are many such stories. There is Mr. Savane from Nagpur. He'll be probably 90 this year. He got diabetes when he was 16 or something, and 74 years he's managed very well without any complications of diabetes, probably India's longest surviving type 1 person. And so what all these people are showing, last year, in fact, we had a medal ceremony where 8 people who had completed 60 years with type 1 diabetes, we gave them a medal, the Dr. V Mohan Victory Over Diabetes Medal, just to show that it's possible. People would not even believe. Even the minister who's my colleague, Dr. Jitendra Singh, who works in the Prime Minister's office, he's a diabetologist. When I called him, sir, you come for the function, he said, how can people live 60 years with type 1 diabetes, Mohan? Is it possible? I said, sir, come, and then you give the medal, then you'll know that seeing is believing. And he said, this is remarkable. I have not even dreamt that somebody with type 1 diabetes can live 60 years and then come to receive a medal, having no complications. So even to doctors and even to diabetologists, and these are all news showing the changing times. And I'm sure this will make Banting and Best really happy, because what they discovered 100 years ago, today making people live for up to 90 years of age. That means when they got the diabetes, it would have been 10 years after the discovery of insulin, and people are still alive, and then live to tell the tale. So it's amazing.
That's fabulous. I think, it's such a heartening, positive, example when someone like that is not only manages to bring the inner motivation to handle their own situation, but also reach out to so many to
others
and motivate. And talking about inspiration, who and what is your inspiration, doctor, to keep going? You've done this so admirably for so long. In fact, I think I would be more specific. Tell us about your dad. After all, he was also, a great man who set you off in some senses on this journey.
Oh, 100%. But for him, I would not have taken up medicine itself.
Exactly.
So my father, Professor M. Vishwanathan, he came from a very humble background because he lost his father when he was 9 years old. And his mother was a doctor, but just an average GP, and she had to struggle to bring him up, and his 2 siblings. But he came to Stanley Medical College, Chennai to study. Somehow after finishing his medicine, and that's a year, I think, India got independence. And so the next year, 1948, he somehow decided that he should work on diabetes. He never really answered. I asked him, why in 48 you thought about diabetes? It was hardly 100 people with diabetes in Chennai, all of Chennai maybe. Why did you think of this? And he said, no, I just got interested. I saw somebody with an amputation. I said, this should never happen. So that kind of inspired him and said, I should do something for these people. So from there, he built the first diabetic clinic in India, in post-independent India. There was one Dr. J.P. Bose in Calcutta who had done it before, but that kind of wound up after that. So he started that. Then in 1971, he had to leave Stanley. Some changes in the government system and all that. So he had to leave. So when he left, that's the time he said, I must do something privately now. I can't stop my work. I'm too young. And that's how he told me. I was his eldest son. And since I was a university topper and all, he said, you will get into medicine anyway. I wanted to do English literature and become a poet and all, the writer. So that was my first dream. But then he said, no, I need somebody to help me with medicine. You do all your scientific writing if you want. Instead of doing poetry and vague writing, you do this. So so that's how he kind of coaxed me to do that. I thought, okay, it's a great idea. And so I joined him at the age of 18 and started working with him at the age of 18. And he was truly inspirational because he didn't care much for money or anything. For him, it was a passion, changing the lives of people with diabetes. Somehow that kind of stuck on to all of us. And now my my daughter, Dr. Anjana, and my son-in-law, Dr. Ranjit, who work for me, they are a third generation. So there's a little joke with, my friends used to say, we know that diabetes runs in family, but the first time we're seeing diabetology run in families. This we have not heard of. My friends used to joke with me. And there's another joke related to this. So somebody came and told me, when I told them, why you have all this diabetes at young age and all, you could have prevented it. No, doctor, it's because diabetes runs in my family. I said, no, it's not the right way. Nobody runs in your family, so you got diabetes. If all of you had been running, you wouldn't have done that. Don't say diabetes runs in your family. You didn't run, so therefore you got diabetes. So,
yeah. So that's wonderful, doctor. I would like to close with one last question. We were kind of focusing on type 1 and the issues. Yeah. But if I have to say, for all of diabetes as a broad condition, lifestyle and management of our own health is so important. So what would be a message to people who have it and you don't have it also, more importantly, right?
Yeah. It's wonderful that you brought it up because this is the eve of World Diabetes Day. And so I can give my dream of what I want for people in the field of diabetes. First of all, if you don't have diabetes, but your parents have it or your brother has it, sister has it, somebody has it, you are already at risk. And you can delay getting diabetes or prevent it totally. Even if you have the gene, you can still prevent it by lifestyle. Diet, exercise, weight reduction, reducing stress. You can prevent diabetes. You may say, what's the point in preventing if I'm going to get it? Oh, it makes a huge difference. If you get diabetes when you're 20, by the time you're 40, you may become blind or your amputation or kidney failure. If you postpone it, say 50 years, from 20 to 50, which is easily doable, you've proven that. You can just change the natural history, even if you're destined to get it. 50, you add another 20, 25, you cross 70, 75. That's number one. Number two, the older you get it, the milder the disease becomes. That means you may not get complications at all. So you have not only postponed diabetes, got good quality 30 years of your life, when you would have been in your working age and having eye vision, going to doctor and everything, all that you have prevented. Secondly, you have prevented all the complications. So you can prevent diabetes. So adopt a healthy lifestyle. Even if you're not going to get diabetes, it will help you to prevent heart attacks, blood pressure, obesity, certain cancers. So adopt a healthy lifestyle from the beginning. Eat more fruit, more vegetables, exercise, do pranayama, go to bed early, go for a checkup to find out whether you're having diabetes. That's the first part for those who don't have diabetes. You have developed diabetes now. Now what I can do, doctor, I developed diabetes. If you have type 1 diabetes, of course, you have to take insulin. You have to learn the nuances of that. You learn the treatment, how to do it. Get your parameters under control. You can have a long and healthy life. If you've got early type 2 diabetes, you can reverse it. If you just lose some weight and start very strict, cut down carbs, cut down calories, you may be able to reverse it in 5 to 10 years. You may not have diabetes at all, which again changes your whole life. If you have crossed that stage, I'm no longer able to reverse, or I don't have body weight to lose, so I'm thin, I cannot lose. Doesn't matter. Keep the sugars under good control. You can have a long and healthy life despite diabetes. The American Diabetic Association gave me the Harold Rifkin Award because we were the first and the only one still now. 2013, I published the paper. 2018, they gave me the highest award in the American Diabetic Association. It's called the Harold Rifkin Award. And then they told me at the time of the award, after I got the award, they told me the reason we gave it to you is because you are the only one in the world who showed that people can live with type 2 diabetes 40, 50 years without complications. We have not shown that. The reason I was able to show is because we get type 2 diabetes early. So they were able to live 40, 50 years. There they get it only in the 50, 60. So you cannot live for 50 years with type 2 diabetes. So the good news is that you can have long and healthy life despite diabetes. So to end on that note, what is my dream? Okay, People often ask me, can you get rid of diabetes totally? Not type 2 diabetes, because type 2 diabetes is described by Shushruta and Charaka 2000 years ago, 3000 years ago. Okay. So that is going to be difficult to, you have a genetic, such a strong genetic thing. Type 1 diabetes, maybe you may find the, the way to produce insulin islet cells, which can, if you can make islet cells which can make insulin for you and inject it, that Banting discovered the hormone. But now if you can make those cells which make the insulin artificially, just like you're making insulin artificially, you make those cells artificially, inject it once a year or something, that will start producing insulin, you can get a cure through stem cells or something. So that is not too far away. It's going to happen in our lifetime or the lifetime of the current children with type 1 diabetes. I think it will happen. So that means type 1 diabetes is cured. But type 1 diabetes is only 1 to 2% of all the diabetes. Okay. So my dream is not of a diabetes-free India, but a diabetes complications-free India. No one in India should go blind due to diabetes. Nobody in India should need a dialysis or transplantation due to diabetes. Nobody in India should lose a limb due to diabetes. And nobody in India should get a heart attack due to diabetes. Due to other reasons also you can get heart attack. But due to diabetes, no increased risk, and not at a young age anyway. If these we are able to achieve, I think they are eminently achievable if you follow the ABC mantra. A is A1C, get it under control. B is blood pressure, keep it under control. C is cholesterol, bad cholesterol. These are the three which I showed in that paper, for which I got that award. A, B, C. You just follow this, you will get. D is also needed, of course, discipline. Discipline, diet, exercise, all comes under D. So if you just follow this on World Diabetes Day, let me give you both my prayers as well as my blessing and my wish that every one of you who hears this program or doesn't hear this program also has a long and healthy life despite diabetes.
Fantastic. I think that's a fabulous note to kind of end at. For those who haven't got it, keep it away. For those who have late stage diabetes, keep it under control. There are things you can do. And the hope that access for those with, say, type 1 is made available through increased collaborative efforts and awareness and advocacy. And in hopefully not the distant future, a fix for the problem that is, it takes away some of the, day-to-day hassle of managing the condition. So I think we'll leave it at that. I
can see a lot of comments coming, and a lot of people are thanking and they found it information.
Yes,
so big thank you to all of you on a Sunday. You have all joined, and thank you all for staying, watching, and for all your kind comments.
Yeah, and I would, in the interest of time, what I would say is that if there are any questions, would you please inbox it to us? I would be happy to, collect them all and direct them at Dr. Mohan, and we will try and get back to you. My email is paul, paul.hf@hindujafoundation.com. So Paul.
Can repeat it.
Yeah. Paul, paul.hf@hindujafoundation.com.
Good. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you, Doctor. Pleasure. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the good work you're doing. Please keep it up.
Bye-bye. Thank you.